Today, we're diving into one of the biggest questions in economics. What actually determines a country's total income? We're going to find the answer by exploring the really groundbreaking ideas of John Maynard Keynes.
So let's get right to it. What really moves the needle on a country's economy? You might think it's all about how much our factories and our workers can produce, right? Our total capacity? But what if there's another force at play, a completely different engine driving the whole system? Well, that's the mystery we're going to unravel today.
Now, to get to the heart of this, we have to simplify things a bit. So for this model, we're going to pretend that prices and interest rates are just fixed. They're not changing. It's a classic move in economics. It lets us zero in on the one thing we really care about right now, and that's national income.
All right, so first things first, we have to understand this really crucial difference between what we intend to do in an economy and what actually ends up happening. This is the world of plans versus reality.
Okay, so we've got two fancy-sounding but super important terms here. First is ex ante. All that means is the plan. It's what households plan to spend and what companies plan to invest. Then there's ex post. That's just what actually happens, the final result. And here's the secret to this whole model. Understanding the ex ante part, the plan, is everything.
And here's a perfect example to make this crystal clear. Let's say a company plans to add 100 rupees worth of goods to its warehouse. That's their ex ante plan. But whoops, demand suddenly spikes and they end up selling 30 rupees worth of stuff right out of that new stock. So what's the reality, the ex post? Their inventory only actually grew by 70. See the gap? The plan was 100, the reality was 70. That difference is so important.
Okay, so now let's talk about the real engine of the economy in this model. It all comes down to total planned spending, or what economists call aggregate demand.
And to keep things straightforward, this total planned spending, this aggregate demand, is made of just two main things. First, there's what we as households plan to spend. That's consumption. And second, what firms plan to spend. That's investment. Simple as that.
So let's start with us, with household spending. How on earth do you predict that? Well, we use something called the consumption function. It's basically just a rule that tells us how our spending habits change when our income changes.
And here's the formula that drives it all. Don't worry, it's not as scary as it looks. Total consumption, C, is made of two parts. First, you've got C bar. Think of this as your baseline spending, the amount you spend no matter what, even if you have zero income. You might be dipping into savings for this. The second part, CY, is the spending that's directly tied to the income you actually earn.
And that little C in the formula, it has a big name, the marginal propensity to consume, or MPC. But all it really means is this. If someone hands you an extra dollar, how many cents of that dollar are you going to spend? So if your MPC is, say, 0.8, it just means you'll spend 80 cents of every extra dollar that comes your way.
Let's make this real with a made-up country. We'll call it Imagenia. So using their formula, we can see a really clear pattern. Check this out. If income is 0, people are still spending 100 rupees, probably from their savings. Once their income hits 500, they spend exactly 500. They break even. And then when income gets up to 1,000, they spend 900, and finally, they start to save 100. The pattern is simple. The more you earn, the more you spend.
Now for that second piece of the puzzle, investment. And for our simple model, we're just going to assume that firms decide to invest a fixed, constant amount every year, no matter what the national income is doing. We call this autonomous investment, or IBAR.
Okay, so we've got our two main pieces of the spending puzzle. Consumption from households, which goes up and down with income, and this fixed level of investment from firms. Now, let's put them together.
This brings us to the really cool part. This is the aha moment, where we combine everything we've just learned and see how an economy actually finds its balance, its equilibrium.
So, what is this equilibrium we're talking about? Well, think of it as a point of perfect balance. It's that magic level of national income where the total amount the economy plans to produce, that's our output, Y, is exactly equal to the total amount everyone plans to buy, our aggregate demand. The plans line up perfectly.
So let's just build it out step by step. We start with equilibrium, where output, Y, equals aggregate demand, AD. Simple enough. We also know that AD is just consumption plus investment. And since we already have the formulas for those, we can just plug them right in. And voila, that final equation, that shows us exactly where the economy is going to settle.
Right, that's the ideal situation. But what happens in the real world when things get, well, out of whack? What if what we plan to produce just doesn't match what we all plan to spend?
Okay, scenario 1. Let's say firms produce way more stuff than people are planning to buy. What happens? Well, those goods just start piling up in warehouses, right? The shelves are overflowing. Economists call this unintended inventory. When firms see this happening, they do the logical thing. They cut back on production. And as they produce less, national income falls, pushing the whole economy back down towards that balance point.
Now for the flip side. Scenario 2. Everyone is in a buying mood. Planned spending is way higher than what firms are making. The shelves start to empty out. This time, it's unintended inventory depletion. Seeing this crazy demand, what do firms do? They ramp up production like mad to restock those empty shelves. And this burst of production raises the national income, pushing the economy back up toward that equilibrium point.
So, after going through all that, plans, spending, inventories, why does any of this actually matter? What's the big idea we should walk away with here?
It all boils down to this one single, really powerful insight. In this Keynesian world, a nation's income isn't set by its potential to produce things. Nope. It's determined by everyone's collective plan to spend.
Let me just say that again because it's so important. It's not our capacity to produce that matters most. It's our collective plan to spend. That aggregate demand, that's the driver. That urge to spend is what sets the pace for the entire economy. If we all plan to spend a lot, income will be high. If we don't, income will be low. It's that direct.
And that leaves us with one last really big question to think about. If a lack of planned spending is what causes an economy to shrink, what does this powerful idea tell us about how we should maybe try to fight recessions? Something to chew on. Thanks for listening.